Eve Ensler uses the word femicide to characterize what's happening to Congolese women in the full view of the world. And when she does, a torrent of fussy linguistic misogyny is brought into play, and comfortable bureaucrats recoil in horror. But how else do you describe an unrelenting pattern of attacks on women precisely because they are women, so extreme as to destroy their physical anatomies while subjecting them and the family members who are forced to watch to scenes of rape and mutilation worthy of Caligula in his worst moments of insanity? In the eastern region of the Congo, where the most awful depredations occur, where the roving bands of crazed militias hold sway, where the government forces have often been as bad as the rebels they fight, in the city of Bukavu, in the Panzi Hospital, thousands of women present each year with fistula, their sexual and reproductive tracts torn apart, many HIV positive, all of them traumatized to lesser or greater degree by the madness to which they've been subject. What would you call a so-called international community that knows all of this and does nothing year after year until it comes to the attention of the mainstream media? What words best describe humanitarian efforts that amount to standing by while excellent but tiny and desperately poor indigenous grassroots NGOs provide solace and support to tens of thousands of rape victims ranging in age from under a year to over 80, grassroots groups that struggle with backing from a handful of international NGOs who form a network of solidarity that is valiant but pathetically small. In fact, just to demonstrate how slowly enlightenment is embraced by the apparatus of the United Nations, it's necessary to point out that when an ostensible peace agreement was signed between the government of the Congo and the various rebel groups last January, not only were the raped women given no voice at the peace table, contrary to previous and explicit Security Council resolutions, but the peace accord contained an amnesty provision for the militias involved in the conflict. Give up your arms, and a decade's worth of torture and terror will be forgiven and forgotten. It's simply beyond the pale. And the accord was orchestrated and signed by the UN peacekeeping force in the Congo. How vile is that? It's hard to know whether embarrassment or concern has finally brought multilateralism partially to its senses. There's been an unexpected volte-face. So extreme have things become, this war on women, that just last month, June 19th to be exact, the Security Council of the United Nations unanimously adopted a resolution defining acts of sexual violence in conflict and post-conflict situations as an issue of international security. And so it is that sexual violence joins HIV/AIDS and climate change as the only issues outside the normal ambit of the Security Council that have been designated as matters of peace and security. The Council described sexual violence in armed conflicts as reaching, quote, appalling levels of brutality, close quote. It went on to say that sexual violence is used, quote, as a tactic of war to humiliate, dominate, instill fear in, disperse, and or forcibly relocate civilian members of a community or ethnic group. During the debate, retired Major General Patrick Kamar, former commander of MONUC, the Congo's 17,000-member peacekeeping force, said dramatically but saliently, "It has probably become more dangerous to be a woman than a soldier in an armed conflict." I summon all of this material today to make the point to all of you that there's a terrible assault on women continually taking place in the international community, and it's an assault that compromises their collective health in every way. The response thus far has been negligible. Long before the Security Council took notice, sexual violence was escalated from a battle tactic to a systematic strategy of war, where from the outset it's understood by military commanders, by military factions, by military marauders that the cheapest and easiest way to destabilize and dismember a village, a community, a province is to rape the women and girls. Sexual torture eviscerates the women, and it terrorizes and traumatizes their children as well, and their partners and their extended families, the communities themselves. It's the ultimate sabotage of human health. In the darkness and depth of the trauma, physical and emotional, the women are rendered incapable of playing the roles that society has assigned to them. They are lost as parents who take their children to health clinics and schools, lost as the mainstays of the family life, as the gatherers of wood, the drawers of water, the providers of meals, as the farmers who maintain agricultural productivity, as the bearers of children, because in so many instances they can no longer bear children. And in a final, what feels to be almost diabolical touch, a significant number of the women find themselves stricken with HIV. Somewhere, somehow, not surprising perhaps, the men who prosecute war in this world have learned from each other that the shredding of women is the shredding of the health of entire communities, even countries. This is their odious version, shrewdly calculated, of gender analysis. The militias understand the sexist societies in which they were raised and know that those societies need strong, healthy women to survive and to thrive. International human rights conventions all use the same phrase. Everyone is entitled to the highest attainable standard of health. How can that be reconciled with sexual violence? And yet almost all of the countries where violence abounds have ratified the conventions. As far back as 1948, the World Health Organization adopted as its mantra, quote, "Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity," close quote. How can complete physical, mental, and social well-being be reconciled with sexual violence? It's not possible. And to the extent that the world and its institutional construct, the United Nations, are slow to respond or fail to respond, the world and the United Nations are complicit. There is no room here, if I may be presumptuous, for domestic insularity. I'm speaking to an overwhelmingly American audience. It's vital to recognize that the United States can in no way keep its distance from the abattoirs of malice in this world. We talked yesterday of a paradigm shift. Well, that shift has to embrace the concept of global citizens, has to understand that when it comes to an issue of international peace and security like sexual violence, the obsession with boys and guns and war has to be transformed into an obsession with forcing the Security Council to go beyond mere words, with an all-consuming determination to prevent the rape of women and girls, with medical services to repair the reproductive tracts of the women, with safe houses so that the women can recover in security, with counsel so that psyches can heal, with the quest for justice so that the culture of impunity is forever expunged from the planet.